Hey there, let's compare crop mode with clear image zoom on the Sony A7 IV. Crop mode is available in some of the modern Sony cameras, mainly the ones that have higher megapixels and allows you to crop in on the sensor. But clear image zoom is in almost every modern Sony camera, and there's some differences between these two things when you want to crop in the camera. So I want to get into those details, the pros and cons of each. We'll compare them against each other, but also comparing them with an actual optical zoom, and also compare that with just zooming in post, right, in your editing software. So we'll start with the 1.5 times crop. This is available, as I said, in a lot of the Sony cameras that have higher megapixels. It's a 1.5 times APS-C or Super 35 crop, and what it does is it uses the center part of the sensor. It doesn't change the exposure. It really shouldn't impact the image quality, but it will have more noise at a given exposure. So if you have questions about how crop factors or crop sensors, how that affects things like exposure, depth of field, and noise, I made a really nerdy, detailed video all about that. I really recommend you check that out, link down below, and you can understand a lot of the details behind all of this stuff here. So with the Sony A7 IV, when you're shooting in 4K, it takes a 7K oversampled image to make the 4K, but if you're in crop mode, it does a 4.6K oversample. So we're not getting any line skipping or pixel binning. We're gonna get a very sharp, crisp, detailed image, and we should get really high quality with that. So I wanna compare that, again, with those other things like the optical zoom and then zooming in the computer, and also compare it with clear image zoom. So clear image zoom is in most modern Sony cameras, and to me, it's kind of like dark magic. I don't really understand how it works, but it works really well, and I think it can come in handy in a bunch of situations. So I went and looked it up, and on their website, Sony says that clear image zoom is a function that uses the Sony exclusive bipixel super resolution technology. It allows you to enlarge the image with close to the original image quality when shooting still images. Okay, but we're gonna be shooting video, but again, it applies here too. So what I wanna do first here is show you just quickly how I set it up on my camera, and then we'll talk about the examples and all that kind of stuff. But right here, we have the Sony A7 IV, and for the examples, we're gonna be using the 24 to 70. Now let me show you how I have this set up on the A7 IV. What I wanna do is have a custom button on the back to have quick access to clear image zoom. Now on the FX3, it has that nice zoom rocker under the shutter button, and I use that for clear image zoom because I don't use a lens that has power zoom. But on this, it doesn't have that rocker switch because the power switch is actually underneath the shutter button. So what I do here is set up one of the custom buttons on the back. Let me show you how I do that. So on the camera here, if we go into the menu and we go down to the suitcase or briefcase at the bottom there, go to Operation Customize, and then for video, custom key dial set. And we're gonna go to the second one here, rear 2. And what I'm gonna set it to is button number 5, which is the bottom button here, because I don't use that for anything else. So we're gonna select that, and I'm gonna choose zoom, and to find zoom, it's located under the first one, the video menu, zoom, and zoom. So now, once that's set up, if I wanna turn clear image zoom on, I just press the down button, and then I can press left and right here to zoom in and out. And then if you're curious, I have a quick button for crop mode too, and I did a full video setup guide for the A7 IV. I'll leave that video down below too, but basically this button here, C1, I have that set up for crop mode, so that can toggle crop mode on and off. So very quickly and easily, I have access to both of these things here, so I just want to show you how I have that set up. Now let's get to some examples. I did some here in the office, I did some outside. We'll start with the ones here inside, and for all of these, I shot them on the A7 IV with the 24 to 70 G Master, and I kept all the settings the same. So we're shooting in 24 frames a second, XAVC SI 4K, f2.8, ISO 800, which is the base ISO in S-Log3, will be in S-Log3, and the shutter speed will be 1/50. Focus breathing compensation is turned off, and the stabilization is turned off because focus breathing compensation adds a crop, and the active stabilization also adds a crop. So in these examples here, we'll be using sort of the base focal length of 24 millimeters, and then when I zoom in optically, I will change that based on what I need, based on the settings I'm using in the camera. So what we'll do is I'll show you all the comparisons here, and then we'll go through and I can talk about my conclusions. After seeing those examples, let's talk about some of the results. Some of them were surprising, some of them were not at all. But if we look at the first example, we're comparing the crop mode versus the optical zoom, which is around 36 millimeters. The optical zoom had a more shallow depth of field, not surprising because it has a longer focal length, but the crop mode had more noise and was less sharp, again, not surprising. Clear image zoom versus the optical zoom basically had the same results as the crop mode. So the optical zoom has a more shallow depth of field, the clear image zoom has more noise and is less sharp. So again, really not that surprising. What was surprising was when we compared the clear image zoom with the crop mode. So we get the same framing and the same depth of field and very similar sharpness. But what was different that I noticed was the crop mode had more noise. And this was a little surprising, but also not surprising at the same time. So one thing is with crop modes or crop sensors, they're gonna have more noise at the same exposure. And so if you wanna understand why that's true, again, go watch that video down below. Very, very, very interesting to understand all this stuff. So what happens if you combine the two, the clear image zoom and the crop mode, and then compare that with a longer optical zoom? Well, basically, it's what you'd expect. It's a combination of all those things above. So the optical zoom will have a much more shallow depth of field. It's a much longer focal length, and the optical zoom will obviously have less noise and will be more sharp. So now that we compared optical zoom versus crop mode and clear image zoom, I want to compare those two things with just zooming in post. These results were a little bit interesting comparing crop mode and clear image zoom with just zooming in post. So in the first comparison, we're comparing crop mode versus zooming in post. I noticed I got pretty similar sharpness, and zooming in post had just slightly less noise, so they were pretty similar. When comparing zooming in post with clear image zoom, I noticed that they looked very similar both in terms of noise and sharpness. That was really interesting to me. Now when we combine clear image zoom and crop, and then we compare that with just zooming in appropriately in post, overall, zooming in post had less noise, and the clear image zoom and crop mode was sharper. So I think those are the big takeaways here. Zooming in post will give you less noise, but it will give you a less sharp image. And those are the big takeaways from comparing those. Now, let me show you some examples outside. Those results, I think, just backed up all the tests that we did inside, but I just want to give you another scenario so you could see that in action. Now, one thing that's very different between clear image zoom and crop mode is that crop mode has eye and face detect autofocus where clear image zoom does not. Now, this can be a disadvantage, so what I want to do for here is just show you if the autofocus and how it works using clear image zoom outside. Autofocus seemed to be doing pretty well there. I mean, the autofocus system in these Sony cameras is just amazing, pretty much in every mode anyways. But I think if you're gonna really need very accurate and reliable autofocus, clear image zoom is gonna be a little bit of a disadvantage compared to crop mode because crop mode has eye and face detect. So anyways, just wanna show you that there. Now, another thing you can, if you really want more reach in your camera, you know, in addition to combining crop mode and clear image zoom, to get a little bit more, you can add focus breathing compensation, which gives you a couple extra percentage depending on the lens you're using, and you can also turn on active stabilization. So if you really want a whole bunch more zoom, you can definitely do that in camera by adding those things on to that. Now, what are some conclusions here? Of course, Optical zoom is going to be the best image quality possible. You're going to get more options with depth of field as well. So again, if you can put a longer lens on your camera when you need to, that's obviously going to give you the best results, but some of the stuff will work in a pinch. When you're comparing crop mode versus clear image zoom, crop mode has better autofocus than clear image zoom, which we just talked about. And also clear image zoom seems to have less noise than crop mode. So again, depending on what you're doing, those might be some things to consider, but you can combine those to get a little bit more reach. And lastly, zooming in post gave us a less sharp image, but less noise. So those are my results of comparing crop mode and clear image zoom in the Sony A7 IV. Hopefully you found this helpful. And if you did, please consider hitting subscribe. It'd be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.